Hello and welcome to Through the Mist with me, your host. This is Brayden Theory podcast where we look at the law and try to understand how it all works. In this episode, we'll be looking at
what makes the Greek center of power America.
Hello, Mythbusters! Woo! It's another episode! Yeah! Woo, woo, woo. Welcome back, everybody. We've got a special guest with us. Say hello to the Mythbusters, Brayden.
Hi, Mythbusters. I'm Brayden. I'm visiting from the Return to Camp Half-Blood podcast. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, I'm excited to have you. It's gonna be fun. Do you wanna give a little promo, anything on the top while we're here?
Yeah, I'm one of three hosts of another Percy Jackson podcast. We break the books down by chapters and analyze them each through a theme. We take like a literary analysis approach, or we sometimes get very distracted along the way. But yeah, that's what I do in the Percy Jackson space. If you want to check out, I also own a theater company.
Woo!
And it's called Next Life Theater Company. And you can also look up that too. Theater is a little bit less of a thing you can participate in online, but you can always follow us on Instagram.
Get those impressions up, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah. So regular listeners will know, usually around this point, I talk about a question that I asked last time. I did not ask a question this time. Why, I hear you ask? Because I was talking about your guys' opinions anyway, so we didn't have one. But you know, sometimes you gotta rock the boat, but we got Brayden here, so yay, who cares? Yeah, that's so we shall get into the episode itself.
Okay, let's go.
Out the window. So, yes, as Brayden so wonderfully introduced in the introduction, we are looking at what makes the Greek center of power America. So, I'm not sure when I put this on my list, but I put this on my list, and I was like, it's a good episode, it's a fun episode idea. I can't remember why. I feel like there was a reason why now. But I went, you know what, I need to start and go back and listen to my very first episode, because that was all moving to America. But what I did have to do, because you'd be like, oh, why didn't you just look up your notes? Why didn't you just look up your notes from last time? Well, you see, the thing is, episode 1 is the only one I lost my notes for, because I was an idiot and forgot how to, and accidentally deleted them when I was creating the Through the Mist account and stuff, and who cares. But there's a couple key points we're going to pull out before we dive into America stuff. Can you? If there's a slight echo, I'm sorry. I feel like my voice is bouncing off my radiator.
Yeah, I'm not hearing that
Okay.
much, so I it's probably fine.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so the couple things before we move into what makes America, just a couple of reminders to pull out from episode 1 about moving to America, is that my belief that it was probably in Britain before, and the reason it moved away from Britain because they started looking more east and expanded their empire, and so removing the idea of the heart of the West. It's a weird thing I've thought about. I'm not quite sure if it fits anymore, but also in that I talked about how they didn't move over to the States until after independence, but they had to move over before the American Civil War because of book reasons. So there's a lot of different bits there that we need to remember. But I think a good place to start is, so if we think about why America, well, the reasons in the books is it is the heart of Western civilization. And people, and you can say what you like about this, but what does Western civilization mean? I think is a good initial question to ask and delve into.
I think that's such an interesting place to start this question, because that is one of the big things that whenever it's mentioned in the books, I am also like, what do you mean? Because I think Rick Riordan has a different idea of what he thinks the heart of Western civilization is toward what I think it really is. Like, I think Rick considers heart of Western civilization much more along the lines of like the Greeks invented democracy and like the Romans spread technology. England made the world more global. America did something, I guess, but it feels like a very positive take on this without the atrocities that follow everything.
Yeah, no, I agree. um, but so one of the key things to ask is, what does civilization mean? Like, when we say civilization, what the heck are we talking about? Like, what even is that? So the key thing is that it means the culture and where it emanates from. So for Western civilization, it is basically very dumbed down thoughts about what's Western civilization. It is a combination of the ideas and thoughts from both Greco-Roman and Christians' beliefs. And these beliefs and ideals are what brought about the commonality between the different countries that we would now consider part of the Western civilization. And so this is all your Western European countries and Australia, because globalization. So you can see why you might call, in 2024, ignoring anything else, why you might say that the Greco-Roman gods would end up in America, because they're very heavily important in the culture of the rest of these countries. I mean, you can pin it down to basically their media output being ridiculously huge, and it is probably what they're best known for in like a generic sense, and it is probably the most influential part. Yeah, and you can, from a British perspective, what you sometimes hear is, to become truly massive and global and huge as an artist, you have to break America. And when I was writing my notes, I was like, the British invasion, so like the all the pop bands like the Beatles and Rolling Stones and stuff that appeared. Rolling Stones British? Have I just made that up? I don't know. The Who is definitely British. Like the Who and the Beatles, that probably wouldn't be as big as they are now globally if they didn't break America when they did. If they didn't become big in America. And like, I feel like that is the simplest and nicest and friendliest explanation of why today you might consider it in America.
And I think that's why America and Greece have so many things in common. That I think America is similar to Greece and Rome in different ways, whereas in the militaristic and like colonialization ways, very similar to Rome, and which it inherited directly from Britain, but the influence on culture is very similar to the proliferation of like Greek classics throughout like the Renaissance period. Yeah, that's just interesting to me, that like culture as a way of telling your story, like these are our morals of this country. It builds a identity for a country, even if it's just like whatever Beyonce or Taylor Swift are doing, still represents the country that they're from in some ways.
Yeah. Should we learn a bit about history now? The fun, terrible, boring bit.
Yes.
Groovy Greeks.
Okay, so this is editing Owen here, and I just want to come in quickly and say, I thought it would be funny to do a horrible histories bit here, because history, you get it, you know, and but there's not like an American lick, so we've got Groovy Greeks. You've got the Groovy Greeks. Okay, this is what you've got instead. Now just have fun and enjoy the rest of the episode. So history time, and I want to be clear about this. Is I learned all this from basically one source. I double checked it against a few others, but as a British person, I have not learned much about American history. So I googled, why is America a global power, and a few things came up, and you'll be surprised to know, like shock horror, it's all about war. Who could have guessed? Not this guy. As I briefly touched on, I think from a 21st century's perspective, it kind of makes sense. why you might say this. However, what the issue with this podcast is that we try and take what Rick says and make it actually work. And I think this is one of the ones where Rick is just a bit American-centric with the whole idea. And with my British education, it doesn't quite compute with the timelines of everything happening. And that might be British bias coming in. That might be, I don't know, but it just doesn't quite compute with that. And I think Rick's got an American bias, I've got a British bias. If you're in another country, you're going to have their bias. It's just the way the world works. You're going to be biased towards the things you know and understand. So yeah, I did some research and came across a few key bits of thinking that led to America becoming a global power and therefore becoming the cultural hub of Western civilization, which I'm translating into the heart of Western civilization. To be clear, that's how the translation is occurring. So doing some research, it wasn't until 1898, after the war with Spain, and they inherited a lot of land because of it, that they were like, you know what, let's get even more land. And then they did the whole colonization thing, and a few other things happened. But that was all relatively isolated and very much just on the American continent. So they just gained control and power through that and the resources they had. But what also happened and went in their favour is that they are physically isolated relatively to the majority of the rest of the world at the time when the world wars happened, because the world wars are big and scary. Because of the world wars and their physical isolation, they were less impacted by the war itself as a country, because it didn't happen where they were, and so they had a bigger economy. They were just stronger as a unit than what were the prevailing powers of Europe and stuff. And they didn't really, what they also didn't really do is give back land afterwards like the British did, which is where they declined in power because I don't know, I feel weird talking about this stuff, but this means that you don't really get big America and America being a proper power until after World War One, which is in 1918, which is 57 years after the American Civil War in 1861, which according to Rick in the books was a Greek versus Roman things, which means they've had to have moved and emigrated there at the time. And that, I think, is the conundrum with lining up real world history with Rick's history, but the real world history is annoying and I don't like it anyway. So
I think that there's definitely arguments you could make to push that date in either direction. I think it's the post-Civil War era of America, the Restoration period and industrialization and like the rise of robber barons here. The wealth that was coming into America in the late 1800s and early 1900s, while we could still make children do labor, was crazy. And I do think that time period, especially as we were colonizing other places, not as much as the European powers, but we were still trying. That is at least when the U.S. became on par, I think, with the Western European powers. But I would say it was not until even later, honestly, that what was I saying? That it was not even later till America really achieved this heart of the Western civilization, because I don't think it was until after World War II. Because following World War I, America hit... the world hit a global depression, but America really suffered from the Great Depression and was only saved because of participating in World War II. And then after that, because of the money that America made on the Second World War, it allowed them to become the global power with the nuclear bomb and the Cold War, I think is really when America steps into that position.
I think my brain was also thinking about music and films and how the 1920s in the States also seemed to bleed globally. Like, that's when films started to get distributed and when stuff would have started coming over this way, this side of the pond and whatnot, which is also, again, after World War One. So I think this is the, biases left, right and centre slipping into work. But there can be a lot of discussions here about ethics and morals and stuff, and I don't know how to talk about it, so I'm just trying to avoid it. I just want to make people aware that I know it's there. I'm staring it in the face, and I'm like, cool, great.
A broad acknowledgement that everything that has been done by every human in history has been bad, mostly.
Yeah. Yes, that is a good way of saying it.
And particularly the people we're talking about today.
Yes, particularly the people we're talking about today, because Christianity decided that was a good idea, and so did the Romans, but they were also Christian. So, who invented it, the Christians or the Romans? That is a question and a half, isn't it?
Rotten Romans. Frightful First World War.
Okay, so if we go off the fact that what we see in the books is gospel, and that is all we can do, because this is the way fiction works, is that once something said, unless it is explicitly taken away, it is always true. You can retcon things, and all of us, I think, are now aware of the retcon. It has happened multiple times in the past, 20 years, to like one character in particular. When we're looking at these books, nothing has officially been retconned properly yet. There's a couple things, but I think they're not really retcons, they're more additions. But this, except maybe the Bianca thing, but that is not what we're going to talk about today. So we have to take the Rick's timescale as good, and I mean, let's be honest, we can just quite simply go, it's all magic. This is magic, and we can do magic things, and magic is magic. Therefore, magic can see into the future, because future vision exists in this universe, and magic knows what's about to happen, or can feel the undercurrents of what's about to happen. Or, and like, that's the simple answer, let's be honest, that's the quick answer, is that magic knows, so magic does what magic does. Or you can not necessarily flip it on its head, but you can think about it as another way, as that it's all the demigods' fault. And the demigods were the ones forcing the move. They decided to go and explore the new land and see what monsters and glory could be won by going over there. And because they congregated there, the gods congregated on top of them. Which is actually, I didn't write, this is a off the top dome thing, but that's also a fun, in the loosest sense of the word, way of thinking about it. It's a different way.
Yeah, I think the idea of maybe just the immigration of demigods influencing them, and the idea that maybe because of the philosophies that come with, like, particularly I'd say like the Greek gods and that culture of like democracy and independence, like that if it's the demigods are moving from Britain to the founding of America, bringing those ideas with them, is an interesting way to look about it, but obviously completely like fanon. But
we hit fanon about 2 seconds into the episode. This podcast is based off me going, and my fanon is the truth fanon, and no one else can say anything different.
You know, and it's very helpful.
We try and fanon through science rather than through vibes. But there's some point you hit vibes, and we've hit the vibes now. We're doing vibes alone. So there is a couple of ideas here. There's either the demigods going across either for as they what's the word they use in the show in season 1 for glory? They're following their glory. They're chasing glory, and they go new place, new glory, and they go over there.
Yeah.
And because they're there, and they are powerful mortals, they influence a lot. And I'm pretty sure Rick at some point has called one of the US presidents a demigod.
Oh yeah, probably.
Like, this has definitely happened at some point. So it's not completely out of the realm of possibility that they were the ones kind of leading the charge of also sharing these ideas, and because they also congregated there, the gods then kind of followed on top of them, and maybe more demigods sought glory, and then the story started to move with them because there was more in this place than there were in other. Collective consciousness moved from one spot to another, so the Greeks then moved, and then it just so happened through other circumstances on top of that, and the last of the European demigods started World War II, that America then became the heart of Western civilization. Rick's put a lot of unhinged dark stuff in these books.
Yeah, for real.
Like they're fun ideas at surface. As soon as you scrape like the grass off, it's just like, why did you do this?
Yeah, like I looked up to see presidents that are demigods canonically, and I was also reminded that Mussolini is also a demigod, which is fun, I guess.
Yeah, the guy with the mustache also might be. So.
Yeah. But Dwight D. Eisenhower is a son of Poseidon, and Ulysses S. Grant. I'm sure he was important. I don't know why. We've had a lot of presidents.
That's kind of all the thoughts I have. You got any additional ideas, Brayden, you want to share with the class?
I think my last thought is just, I think it's interesting to think about where this could move. Like, as the American empire crumbles, that's a really optimistic perspective, but if you're living in America right now listening to this, you know what I'm saying. As the American empire crumbles, or as it will in the future, the in-universe Greeks and Romans will have to move to someplace else, and I think it's interesting to think about where that might be. I don't know. We don't know enough at the moment to like know where that might be, but
yeah,
you couldn't have told the Greek gods that they were going to be in America centuries ago, you know?
Yeah. No, you're right. It's I'm trying to think about how influences are changing. I feel like maybe the Latin Americas somewhere.
I would say my biggest thought is Brazil.
Yeah, that is also a very good shout. Culturally that seems to has bigger influence over. I can't speak. Everyone knows what I'm trying to say. We'll move on. Brayden, do you want to give some last plugs and whatnot before we close this whole thing out?
Of course. Thank you for having me. It was a great time. I love talking about why America's bad. If you want to hear more about why America's bad, you can check out the Return to Camp Half-Blood podcast. We talk about Percy Jackson, but we do talk a lot about why America's bad. And we're reading Trials of Apollo right now and talking about why the emperors are stand-ins for Donald Trump and Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos. So,
to be honest with you, I think that is one of the least subtle hints Rick has ever done.
Oh yes, no, it's real on the page.
Thank you for indulging this theory. If you have any comments on this theories or theories of your own that you want me to discuss, you can email them through to through.t.miss@gmail.com, or you can follow the Instagrams @through_miss. Make sure to follow the podcast, like the podcast, subscribe to the podcast, whatever you have to do, help get the podcast out there. I've been Owen, you've been
Brayden.
And come back next time as we try to see through the mist. And that's a wrap.